I'm James.
I'm Chad.
Gonna be doing something a little bit different today. Gonna be hanging out with our good buddy Tom. Grew up with him, and watching him do a little home brew. Something change of pace. He's gonna go over it with us, and we'll film it.
Sample some.
Yeah. If there's some in the fridge, it'd be a good time. Stick around. Hey, this is my good friend Tom. We grew up together, and he has a little home brew setup in his garage here. And what's the name of that, Tom?
Nimrod Home Brewing.
Nimrod Home Brewing. I like that name.
Yeah.
What he's gonna do is kind of go over the setup, and then we'll just move on from there.
Well, what we got here is just a gravity-fed system. So this will be my hot liquor tank where I heat the water up for my mash tun, and this is the mash tun. So once I get the water heated up to about 165 degrees, I'll drain it into this through gravity, through these hoses, to heat up the mash tun to right around 155, 156 degrees for an hour. And so I'll add the grain as the water goes into that. Once we let that set for an hour and the sugars, it converts the sugars, then I will drain that into the brew kettle. And what I'll do there is I'll actually have this burner up here going, so I'll take that back out of here, put it back in the hot water tank, so that I can get this to 168 degrees. So I have to raise the temperature. And once I get 168 degree wort, is what it's called, coming into the brew kettle, I'll let that flow through the whole system and get my 5.5 gallons of brew down in here, the wort down into the brew kettle. Then I'll boil that for an hour. Then I'll chill it first with my chiller down to 68 degrees again, so that I can pitch the yeast. And then I'll drain it out actually into the fermenter, and then pitch my yeast, which I already have started over on the counter.
So what we'll do is we'll go through the process and kind of a step by step. And this is really just the beginning process for brewing it. Mm-hmm. After this is done, the
yeast will set for at least, it'll be on this particular brew, which I'm calling a Nimrod Lazy Hazy IPA. It'll actually set on the yeast for 4 days, and then it'll be 3 to 4 days, and then I'll pitch my first round of hops, and then I'll let it set for another 3 days and dry hop it again in the fermenter.
So whenever you say pitch, what exactly does that mean?
Actually putting, like I say, that pitch the yeast and pitch the hop is actually putting both of those into the wort.
And the wort is the actual beer,
yep.
But it's called wort.
Until it ferments and becomes alcohol, it's called wort.
All right. Well, let's get started.
All right. 4 3/4 gallons of water into here to preheat to that 168 I was talking about, so that I can pour that into my mash tun to heat the grain up. I actually have a spoon here that I actually have marked so that I can measure how many gallons of water I'm actually putting in here, because you really need to be pretty accurate on what you're getting.
Now, the temperature there thing you want to achieve is pretty important, right?
Right, absolutely, because if you get it too low, then it'll be a drier brew. If you mash it at a higher temperature, it'll have a little more mouth feel and be sweeter. And you want it to be a certain temperature so that you get good conversion. So you actually process the sugars out of the grain properly to be able for the yeast to eat once you get it in the ferment. Trying to recycle some of my water, because it basically you use a lot of water brewing beer. It isn't just the 8 gallons or 9 gallons for a 5-gallon batch. You got another, I don't know, 8 or 10 gallons you probably use just in cleaning, because actually it's basically 2/3 cleaning and 1/3 brewing. You spend a lot more making sure everything's clean and sanitized so that you don't get any infections in your beer before you start. So what I'm doing here is I heated up this mash tun with 5 gallons of water. I heated that up to 170 just to get the cooler warm so that it doesn't drop off as much when I actually put the grains in there, because I don't want it to go too hot on the grains. So this is just heated water that I'm pouring out of there just to get it empty so when this is ready to go.
So, okay.
And I'm using that to actually clean. So this has sanitizer and Star San sanitizer in it. So out of the 5 gallons I put in there, I got 2 gallons over there in PBW, which is a cleaner, and this is Star San. It's actually a sanitizer. So all right, so now we got our strike water heated up that goes in the mash tun with the grains. So what I'm going to do now is actually take the lid off of this. This is already preheated, just so I can hold a little bit of temperature. So I'm going to take the lid off, and I'm going to start. Actually, I got to do something else quickly to get out.
What is this preheated to?
I preheated that. I just put 170-degree water into it to preheat it for an hour, just so that when I actually put the grains and the hot water in there, that this water didn't have to be as hot, so it would maintain a more even temperature. Yeah.
Okay, what are you brewing? What flavor? What type? What?
It is a Nimrod Lazy Hazy IPA, and so it'll have a fruit flavor to it. I'm not actually doing any hop additions to the boil kettle. They're all dry hop additions afterwards, and so there won't be a lot of bitterness. It'll be a little more fruity on the end.
Other question would be, this was all pre-measured for this recipe. Everything that was needed was added to this bag.
Right, absolutely. And the Pilsner grain, the 8 pounds of Pilsner is the only thing they actually grind up, so it has more surface area for the hot water to convert the sugars. The flaked barley, wheat, and oats are all just whole. And that basically adds. It's where you get your haziness from. Is from all the flaked grains. This is actually my grain bill for this particular brew that I already had ground, other than the flaked oats and barley that are in it. This came from my good friends at Capital City Brewing in Springfield. They hooked me up with all this stuff. The hops, actually, I do not have on this particular brew. I do not have any hops going into the kettle. There's no bittering hops going into this beer. It's actually just 2 dry hops, so you'll get more. You won't get the bitterness of an IPA. It's going to be more. It's going to be more juicy, more orange flavored, lemon flavored, fruity flavored. Now that I got this empty, preheated and empty, you might look down in here, James. So what we got going on in here is this stainless steel tube actually holds the grains from being drained into the brew kettle. And then it basically has a float valve that once the mash tun gets full, it'll shut off and not allow any more water in. So it actually, and then this tube here actually hopefully circulate the water in a counterclockwise motion. So now I'm going to start letting water in.
It looks like there's oats in there.
There's flaked oats, flaked barley, and flaked wheat, and Pilsner 2-row malt. It's mainly the Pilsner, which is 8 pounds, and then there's just 2 pounds of the other 3 flakes. So I'm gonna let that fill up until it gets above my drain hose, basically with the false. It used to have a false bottom in it, but it stopped working, so I had to switch over to that hose there because it actually, with the heating of the water, the bottom of the mash tun actually swelled up, would stop the wort from draining out. So now that that's above that, I basically just slowly start stirring this in. Try not to spill any of it, of course, but get my spoon here. Keep that on top. That's where the water's coming in through this tube, and it actually, that ball will make it float so that it stays on top. And what I'm doing here now is basically just making sure, sometimes when you do this, you can get a dough ball, and then what that means is it's clumped together, so you're not actually getting any surface area of the water extracting the sugars from the grains. So every once in a while you want to make sure while you're adding the grain that you stir it so that it doesn't clump up like that. And actually, another good thing, if you can get your wife or girlfriend to do it, all this spent grain is really good to make dog biscuits out of. Add peanut butter and an egg, depending on how much you're using. Make it into a paste, cookie cutter it, bake it in the oven at a really low temperature. There's plenty of recipes online, of course. I typically don't do it because by the time I get done doing this, I'm done. But I have done it. So now, let's keep this stirred. About another gallon. I'm gonna stop that right there for a second, and we heat that water up in case I don't get my temp. I'm only putting about 3.5 gallons in there. I'm gonna check my temperature in that, and if it's not warm enough to the 162 or 3-ish that I'm trying to hit, then I want to be able to hit it with some warmer water to get it up to where I want it to be.
Yes, I just want to see inside.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there's a float on the tube that keeps it so that way the water coming in,
Yep.
the tube will.
Because what you want when I actually get to the point later on, once the mashing is done, I add more water to basically rinse the grains, and you want that. There's multiple ways to sparge, is what it's called. There's multiple ways to do that. What I want that to do is I want it to circulate, so when I'm filtering the grain, that it hits all of the grain as it goes, as the fluid goes through it, the hot water or what it is becoming wort comes through it. You want it to go evenly through it, so it rinses all of the grain, not just in one spot. And there's multiple ways to do that. I'm going to check my temperature here. Yeah, let me grab that recipe. I believe it's 162 for an hour. And we're a little low, so that's all right. That's why I've got this heating up.
So you can top it off with the hotter water to bring it up to temp.
Right, because what I've done before is I'd heat the strike water up to 180, and then I would hit my number. What I was doing there, I was hitting it with too hot of water, and it was making too long of strands of sugar, and then it wasn't being able to be processed by the yeast once I got it in the fermenter. So this time I hit it with the strike water a little lower to get it all mixed in, and I'm going to raise it by adding the last gallon and a half into it. Once I get that,
Why is that called strike water?
good question.
It's the water
That you're striking the grains with is the way I would. We'll have to Google all of that when we're done.
I got a question. Why wouldn't you have this? Why wouldn't you heat this? Why would you add warm water to it? What would the difference be there?
See this. Well, I did preheat this,
Right.
but it's still cooler, so there wasn't anything in it. So that's where you get in. There's other ways of doing this. There's actually mash tuns that have heaters in them. So then you raise the water up, put your grains in, stir it so you don't have any dough balls, and then you can raise your temperature. There's no way for me to raise the temperature in this other than with hotter water coming from the hot water.
Because it has to be insulated and warm at the same time.
Right, because this has to hold that temperature of that 162 I want for an hour.
Without using a flame.
Right.
Makes sense.
If it's a flame, you risk burning something or boiling something out. Or
Right.
blowing something.
And this is just, it is a cheaper way to do it. I mean, because you get into your hot water, your mash tuns that are stainless steel, you can spend, it's like any other hobby, you can spend as much as you want. $1,000, $500 for a heated mash tun, and you got to brew a lot of beer to get that money back.
Right.
That's an interesting looking burner too. Is that specific for this type of setup, or
It's specific for a turkey fryer.
well, it works?
Yeah, that's what I've done. Is just my parents actually had 3 or 4 turkey fryers. I just took 2 of them apart and used the burners.
What about that stock pot? Did you make the fittings? And
I actually bought that pre-made, and it's amazing how much heat that will even hold. I'm not sure, I can't remember what gauge stainless steel it is, but it without any insulation holds really well. Gonna hold on to that for me. Would you mind? Yeah, don't wrap the lid though.
right. A little warm.
Yeah.
And right now I'm just lifting it up just to get that last little bit out of the bottom. I'll take the lid back. Is it cooled off at all?
I didn't even touch it.
May not be then. Give this a quick stir.
Now, how long is it gonna set in this container in the mash tun?
Mash tun. It will set for an hour. Just to convert all the sugars out of the grains.